beating a dead horse. As always, I'm your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller, playing the role of Paratroopa in the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Oh, wow. When was this announced?
I mean, Paratroopa has one line. They didn't announce it during the direct. I'm not good enough to be with the illustrious ranks of Chris Pratt and Jack Black. Do you feel personally responsible for Chris Pratt being Mario? Because I kind of do. I feel like we shifted the tides of fate by talking about Colin Trevorrow movies 2 weeks in a row.
Oh, man. I thought you were going to say, do I feel personally responsible for it? Because they have both Chris Pratt and Charlie Day in this movie, and I did see the Lego movie 4 times in theaters.
Ooh. I forgot that Charlie Day was in that movie. Yeah. No. I'm talking about this, right here, right now, what we're doing.
That's fair. Although, thankfully, Chris Pratt isn't in the Book of Henry. So, I feel like I think I'd be more responsible if they were like, and Colin Trevorrow is here to play Birdo or something like that.
Right.
Then I'd feel particularly bad. But as it is, no, I watching Jurassic World movies, I'm hoping didn't tip those scales on a cosmic sense, obviously. But I think that might just be me trying to convince myself that it's not my fault.
It's an ill omen, regardless, to just get that news dropped on you after watching both fucking Jurassic Worlds in a very short time span.
That was by far, this is Nintendo Direct conversation here now. If you aren't aware somehow, Chris Pratt is playing Mario in the Mario Brothers movie coming out from Illumination, the people who brought you great movies such as Minions and Minions, as well as Jack Black as Bowser, Charlie Day is Luigi, Peach, I don't know the actress at all, so I'm sure she's fine. Keegan-Michael Key is Toad, which is fucking hilarious.
That's based.
There are some really good casting choices in here, and then there's Chris Pratt as Mario.
Chris Pratt is the only one. I can't say that, I don't like what Seth Rogen's presence as Donkey Kong implies for that character, but, I don't mind that on its face. It really is just Chris Pratt as Mario that's ooh.
Yeah, even Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong, I think, could be fun in the right context. I think that's a pretty decent casting. Everything in this still feels like stunt casting directly as a result of Disney being like, yeah, we're going to fucking advertise Robin Williams as the genie for Aladdin.
Yes.
And all terrible as a direct result of that because Charles Martinet is right there. He's in the movie. Why is he not just Mario? Why didn't we resurrect Bob Hoskins?
That's my question. To be fair, no disrespect to Charles Martinet. He's a surprisingly diverse voice actor if you hear him in any role that's not Mario. But, I wonder if you had Mario and Luigi doing the thing, how tolerable would that be for, monologues for 2 hours? You know what I mean?
It's me, Mario! I have committed the sins of mankind, and now I must atone! Bowser, you are my foil! You are the one who sits across from me! And now I ask unto you, do you forgive me my sins for the slaughter of all your minions, the Goombas I have stomped upon, the shells I have cast from the highest towers, the Yoshis I have cast to the pits of hell! Bowser, are you the villain, or is it me, a Mario?
I feel like I just gazed into another dimension for a minute there.
Thank you. I am, in fact, playing the role of Mario in Universe Q928, I believe. So look forward to that there. And yes, those are actually direct lines from the movie. It's a weirdly hard R, super introspective, some wild amounts of nudity. I do just have to warn you for that version. But
Tarantino's Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, it's a really interesting take on the property, I think. The brothers, they're living large, and sometimes you have to atone for your sins. It was actually directed in part by the Coen brothers as well, so.
Okay, the Coen brothers directed the Super Mario Bros. movie. I wish I was in that universe. That sounds incredible.
As I was saying that, I am also very much into that idea as a pitch.
Are you kidding me? That sounds like the greatest movie of all time. Yeah, so to be fair, if Charles Martinet could pull it off, that would have been amazing. I feel like for general audiences, most people are gonna lose their minds by the half-hour mark.
No, I think that's totally fair. Chris fucking Pratt, are you kidding me? I'm so sick of this dude.
Literally the last person I would have wanted, I think.
Jesus Christ. And then he went online to post it's a me, a Mario. Now that's not actually the voice. Did you watch that video?
I didn't. I heard about this.
It's so good. He says, it's a me, a Mario, in his normal-ass voice, and then immediately goes, that's not the voice. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock, for starters, but you're clearly doing damage control here, because the internet exploded after that direct, and it was not good.
I was not happy. I'm kind of shaking in a cold sweat now, thinking about other universes where Chris Pratt has infected things that I enjoy. There's a solid chance that one day we will get Chris Pratt as Goku.
Ooh.
Can you see that happening? Because I can, and I don't like it.
I think Goku is a bit too far flung. But I will say, something that will particularly hurt you is Chris Pratt as Cloud.
Oh no. I don't like that. I don't like that one bit.
And Jack Black is still Sephiroth, which is the wild thing.
That would be so good. You know what? Like, according to the incredible series Let's Mosey by Tim Rogers that analyzes the original Japanese text, Sephiroth's dialogue in the Japanese version is a lot weirder and wackier. So theoretically, Jack Black as Sephiroth could be a godsend.
You know what? Honestly, I like Jack Black enough that I would say take a shot at it there, Mr. Black. I think you're going to do wild, interesting things with it, and I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. Do it. Do it. You're not Chris Pratt, who is the most boring white man in the world.
I was about to say, why didn't they just cast Jack Black as Mario? I feel like that would have been fine, but I mean, we know the answer is because Chris Pratt's, stunt casting because the genie. We are now nearly like 10 minutes talking about the Mario cast.
I know, we're trying really hard to not talk about another Colin Trevorrow movie. We're doing our best. Although, now, okay, we are talking about the Book of Henry, as I said. And I'm going to say, we're going to put in 2 spoiler delineations here. Because I think if you are like, hey, should I watch the Book of Henry as a weird, fucking, bizarre movie to just go in? Yes, but only under the criteria that you know nothing about it going in. Except for the fact that it does go some dark places that might be uncomfortable. That's the one thing I will tell you about it. Knowing just that, you should have a wildly what the absolute fuck time. So if that's you, turn off the podcast now.
Completely agreed. If you were at all part of the initial 2017 like round robin roast of Book of Henry and like you already know what it is and you've been curious about it, I mean, it's exactly what you think it is, so don't bother.
So now, for the rest of you who are still here, we are still going to have a full spoiler cutoff here, but here is where I'll give you a plot summary. If you're like, I don't know that I care about this movie, fine, you're probably in the right for it. The Book of Henry. How do I describe this movie without spoiling it?
I was going to say, like, the problem is that, like, as you said in the pre-discussion, it is sort of like 3 movies in one, but I guess, like, the most baseline description you can give of it is that, like, it is a throwback / like, deconstruction of, like, child genius precocious kid movies, I guess.
That's probably a pretty good way of explaining it. The one word that you did leave out is bad. It is a bad throwback and deconstruction of precocious genius kid movies. That is a very important word when describing this movie because that almost sounds interesting, but it is in fact not and goes so many goddamn places it's not even funny. That's why I think we're going to talk about this movie in comparison to other bad movies because this is what we do when we get a bad movie and compare it to things like The Room or Birdemic or even movies like Serenity, the podcast episode where Jackson and I full-on got into a screaming match. Please go listen to that episode. We recommend it all the time.
So actually, watch Serenity and then watch that episode, because then you can have some input on that debate.
Yes. That's a good idea.
Also, Serenity's hilarious. You should watch it anyway.
So we'll talk about like how that fits in here, but I do think that on the whole, The Book of Henry is a movie that is very, very fun to talk about and describe to other people. Because when we get into the spoilers, I'm going to do a quick plot synopsis where I freely can, and I'm going to have a blast doing it because describing this movie is so fucking hard to do. It is that wild that it's a ton of fun, and it will leave, if you are unfamiliar with the plot, your jaw probably on the floor listening to it because it doesn't make any goddamn sense. Watching it, however, is misery. It is so bad.
Here's my central thesis on why actually watching the Book of Henry is so miserable compared to something like The Room. And it's this. It's that the Book of Henry is baffling and conceptually very funny. But in terms of the moment to moment, you don't have like a Tommy Wiseau, clowning around. You don't even have like a John Travolta in The Fanatic, like
the actors in this are pretty good.
No, like it's the unfortunate reality is that it's made by Colin Trevorrow, so the actual execution is competent. What makes it notable is the plot, which is like coconuts, which is baffling. But if you already know what's coming, then you're not like sitting there like having a haha like guffaw time because like that initial shock, it's already hit you. And I had like seen plenty. I'd read things clowning on Book of Henry, the Dan Olson videos, both of them, the more formal one and the less formal vlog. Like I knew every plot beat to this movie without having seen like a minute of it out of the context of like a video essay.
Yeah, same. I've seen that Dan Olson, the structured one, many a time because I think it's absolutely a great video. Dan Olson's a fantastic video essay. If you haven't watched any Full of the Human stuff, go do it. It's really, really fucking good. I do have to just chime in though and say that despite the fact that everyone really does act their hardest and they do a pretty good job as actors, the one area where it does fall very short beyond just the plot is the fucking script. Because yeah, it's just worth mentioning. Like if we're talking about it as a bad movie, like these are the things that wouldn't feel out of place for the most part in The Room, where people are trying to express an idea and it is having the exact opposite effect. Like you are supposed to be endeared to Henry in the beginning of this movie, and instead every time he opens his mouth you're just like, you are the worst person I have ever had the misfortune of hearing. You would have had the shit kicked out of you every day in elementary school because you are just misery. Adults like love him for some reason, for no fucking reason. He's not funny, he's not clever, he's not endearing, he just sucks all the way through. But the problem is that the kid who plays him acts well enough that you're like, yeah, it's it's fine, it's whatever. It's so distinctly Colin Trevorrow. How does he manage to take bad things and elevate them just enough to be boring? What is this superpower?
He is like the pinnacle of mediocrity. It's actually astonishing. Like, he manages to take stuff that should be like, again, fucking coconuts and make it into something dull. Like that leaked script for episode 9 that's going around, I bet you dollars to donuts that, like, if that had been actually made by Colin Trevorrow, it wouldn't have been like half as interesting or wild as it sounded, just because he's such a boring filmmaker, and yet also such a this movie also like digs me further in my trench that a lot of the like smug insufferableness of Jurassic World was intentional, because you could just tell that, like, you know, between the cringeworthy like religious overtones and just the way the movie treats Henry as, like, you know, this boy genius, you could tell that's how Colin Trevorrow sees himself, and by all accounts behind the scenes, that's how he acts on set.
It's a pretty bad movie.
It's a very bad movie. Speaking of how Colin Trevorrow conducts himself on set, I have some choice quotes that are, well, I'll say this for post spoilers. Actually, it'll be more baffling after you've given us the rundown shot.
All right. I'm very excited for that. I do just want to kind of express something as well about Colin Trevorrow and the Book of Henry on the whole, is that this movie, if you are still with us and you're still thinking, maybe I'll watch this once we hit spoilers, I do just want to express that, like, this movie is 3 movies smashed together in this weird, incongruous way, all the while trying to be funny through a lot of it, and it's not a funny movie. Like, the content that it's trying to get at is distinctly unfunny, and the middle third, the middle movie, and before somebody jumps on my throat, this isn't some fucking 3-act structure thing. It's 100% not that, because each one of these vignettes essentially feel like it has a rising action, a climax, and a resolving action, and somehow aren't the end of the movie.
Because then it just lurches to the next one.
Yeah, but usually with like some fucking joke, and while the mother is eating a Rice Krispie treat, like, record scratch, yep, that's me. I bet you wonder how I got in this scenario. And if you know the scene I'm talking about, the context before it is nuts! But the context before it is also really fucking grim and shot well enough that, like, you do feel kind of gross watching it, because it's just good enough and just sad enough that you're like, this sucks, but it sucks in a way that is so incredibly unfun from either a narrative standpoint or from a watching a bad movie standpoint. It just, like, genuinely tanks it into sad, emotional catharsis that doesn't work, but you still feel bad while watching it, and it sucks a lot. So just be aware of that.
It's miserable. I feel like for this kind of dark humor, I don't even know if I'd call it dark humor. I like, you know, it's like that ineffectual.
This movie isn't funny, and it's so dark in so many places, and it tries to be funny with it. It tries, that's the craziest fucking thing about it, Jesus Christ.
I feel like you would need like a Coen Brothers, you know, I guess speaking of them, like, you would need like a Coen Brothers, like a director who knows how to, like, balance, like, you know, really, like, bleak, kind of understated comedy with, like,
it needs to be dry.
drama. Yeah.
And it's not. Every scene here feels like there should be a laugh track just off screen, cackling as we dig into, like, this 1970s fucking Full House-ass nonsense going on.
I mean, it was written in the 90s, and it feels like it. Like, you could tell, even without
That is true, yeah.
Even without the conspicuous, like, relative absence of, like, modern technology and, like, some of the dated stuff and, like, problems itself and causes, like, whatever. But, like, just the way the dialogue is, the way the characters are written, it feels very 90s comedy in a not good way at all. It's like if the Sonic the Hedgehog movie featured, like, you know, scenes where Sonic goes to, like, the Holocaust Museum. Like, it's that level of, like, cognitive dissonance.
Honestly, this is a really good place to put in a content warning that I didn't think about putting in earlier, but also does a really good job of setting up what we're going to talk about here, and that is child abuse. That is child abuse. And, like,
God.
that's not even the wildest part of the movie. And, like, even there, I sound like I'm being glib about this. The movie is kind of glib, but this is... can we get into spoilers?
Let's get into spoilers. Let's just do it. We're clearly struggling against the boundaries here.
So, before we do move on to spoilers, however, as always, if you enjoy the podcast, please review on iTunes, tell a friend about it. It's the only way to grow. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/BADHcast. The bonus episode is coming. We're running a little bit behind this month because of a lot of things. If you're a regular listener, you probably have a good idea as to what's going on. Follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast. Next week, we're gonna fucking finish up our Star Wars. We've done the prequels. Let's just finish it out with Revenge of the Sith. Honestly, who knows? We might have a guest again or something. We might just be the two of us. Fucking come back. We'll find out. Delia probably is going to want to be on that, and I have no issue with having her on again. So, so for now, though, oh my God, let me describe the plot of Book of Henry to anyone who is still with us who has not seen this movie or has seen this movie and needs a refresher, because fuck me running. It is incomprehensible.
I mean, speaking of, like, you know, you gave the content warning about child abuse. this movie is so much, I forget that this is ostensibly a movie, like, about child abuse at the core. Like,
Yes.
one of the core things. Like, there's just so much. So, by all means, Sean, you take this glorious honor.
So I'm going to try and break this down into the 3 story vignettes that exist within the movie and try and go from there. So story vignette 1 is Henry and introducing us to the world of Henry, where we see that he is indeed a precocious young shithead, where he's really smart and like he is bossing his mother around, telling her to do things. He's the one who's in control of the house, and it's fucking wild because at one point he does tell his mother to get off the video game console for no fucking reason. He walks into the principal's office and goes, "God damn it, Janice," which is fan-fucking-tastic dialogue. It
Incredible.
is so good, so fucking good. But this is also where we are introduced to the subplot that his neighbor stepdad is abusing her. And it's not clear whether it's physical or sexual. I'm not gonna dig too far into that, but either way, it's pretty gross. So this precocious young shithead decides he's going to kill the stepdad. And now, this is where you'd be like, what the fuck? Is this where this movie is going? Are we about to watch an 11-year-old kill the police chief of this town because he's abusing his stepdaughter? That sounds like a crazy fucking movie. That's the first story act thing. That's the first part to this. Jackson, did I miss anything from that? I genuinely have to ask this because there's so many moving parts of this movie.
I just wanted to add, like, while we're in this zone, because I don't have a grand thesis about it or anything, but there are several weird, incestuous, like, Henry is, like, the husband of the household shots of, like, him and his mom, like, laying in bed, like, reading books, like Hank and Peggy Hill.
There's one very weird one in the next section.
I was gonna say there's something more explicit in that one, but, like, even with his mom, I'm like, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. I think that about covers it. Like, this first part, it is a lot of setup, a lot of character establishment, if you could call it that. So.
Because even here, like, no one really establishes an actual character. Like, they're all very one-note, one-dimensional, but it does maybe present some interesting ideas. Like, maybe this is about the mother learning to, you know, grow unto herself, which is almost an interesting idea. Maybe this is about Henry learning, like, where the limits of his actions are, and as a precocious young genius, what he can actually do and what he can't do. All kind of interesting ideas. Then Henry has a seizure. And the next section of the movie is Henry in the hospital literally dying.
And it's not just like Henry has like an aneurysm but he's dead. Like this now it's like we get the hospital drama movie. Like we get it, you know, condensed and compressed.
Yes, and so we fill in a full dying child movie into probably 20 minutes. And as I said, this section is fairly brutal to watch. It's not pleasant in any way, shape, or form for obvious reasons. But during this section as well, we pretty much forego everything else happening outside of this hospital room. There's a little bit of like reminders here and there, but nothing in particular. So much so that I honestly forgot what the fuck was happening outside. Like I'm like, oh yeah, his neighbor has that whole abuse thing going on. We should probably get back to that at some point. Also, Lee Pace shows up, which I'm mentioning here, for one, because it's Lee Pace and he is incredibly attractive, but two, because he comes back later and is a focal point in something that I want to talk about, despite the fact that he is an incredibly minor character who is just a doctor that diagnoses Henry, and then Henry diagnoses himself, and then Henry dies. Henry dies there.
Hooray!
And this is where, twice, your jaw probably just hit the floor, because, wait, I thought Henry was gonna kill the police chief. What the fuck was up with all of the planning that happened in part 1, and now he's dead? Well, fear not. He wrote everything down into this book of Henry, if you would. And told his younger brother to give it to his mother after he died. He also, I can't tell whether in the future this is meant to be her imagining it or whether he actually snuck out of the hospital, head bandage and all, to go home and record like fucking prescient dialogue where he's having actual conversations with his mother through a tape recorder that is incredible. We're getting there. We're getting there.
Before we move on from the hospital, like, because we alluded to there being extra incest creepiness, Sarah Silverman kisses Henry, who's an 11-year-old, on the mouth after he's like, come on, Dame, you know we were just playing hard to get with each other, and then they make out, so that happened.
Okay, so they don't make out, to be clear. They definitely kiss. My fear, I did when this happened, went, so it is still very fucking weird.
I was gonna say, it's borderline making out. Like, that is not a motherly kiss.
No, it is definitely not. It is like you probably want this before you die, huh? Oh. But, like, she also dresses very much like, look at my cleavage. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not here to slut shame or anything like that.
Henry is, though.
Yes, Henry is. And when Sarah Silverman bends over, my only thought is like, oh my god, there's a scene in the first Fast and the Furious movie where someone does that, and then she takes the guy who's driving hand and puts it down her shirt, and I'm like, no, Sarah, no, Sarah, he's 11, Sarah, no, and she didn't, thank God, but it is shot like she is about to. It is so weird and so gross. And then a scene later, his mother, like, curls up into him, and it's shot like this weird romance thing, like they're about to start making out before he dies.
big incest vibes between Henry and his mom. Because Henry's treated, despite what the movie is going to tell us, Henry is treated just like an incredibly smart adult man at all times.
Yeah, and an incredibly smart adult man who has not been told, hey, you're unpleasant to talk to, Henry, because he is unpleasant to talk to. Jesus Christ. Anyway, so he dies, and then the transition from this incredibly sad dour thing, and it's continued to be shot very sad as the brother is sitting on the bed, missing his brother. He notices that Henry's book is still there. He's like, oh, I need to go give that to the mom.
Book of Henry?
The book of Henry. I need to go give that to my mom. Picks it up, flips through a little bit, kind of gets a little wide-eyed, and, skitters out of the fucking room. And it ends, and it transitions to the mother with, a Rice Krispie treat half in his mouth as the brother skitters into the doorway and just goes, Mom, I think Henry wants us to kill Glenn. And you can hear the record scratch. This is clearly meant to be played as a joke. The structure of it's in the cadence of a joke, but it is not funny because it is the most hard left turn out of fucking nowhere that it's oh yeah, he died, and now the mother is going to execute the police commissioner on the instructions of an 11-year-old boy. And she almost does, y'all.
His master plan, by the way, is just to have her shoot him and then have him tumble into a creek. That's it. I don't know why Henry needed to leave such detailed instructions. I guess he's a misogynistic little shit, so his dumb mom wouldn't be able to handle it.
She plays too much Gears of War, and she has to level up in Gears of War, so I don't know. That's the Book of Henry, though. It's not, actually, because I do have to talk about the end for a second.
I was going to say, yeah, you have to talk about how this resolves. You mentioned that she doesn't kill him. What does happen, though?
So, his stepdaughter dances in this there's a talent contest as well. Jesus fucking Christ, there's so many balls in the air! So there's a talent contest that the daughter is going to, and the mother is using that as an opportunity to sneak away because she's been seen at the talent contest, can leave, go shoot him, and then come back in time for the younger brother to do his magic trick. And so, damn it, Janice is watching the stepdaughter dance, and all of a sudden oh, I see now that she clearly has been pain, and this is her blossoming because she's always had one eye covered and clearly closed off, and here her hair is back and her pain is visible as she is truly who she is, dancing in the visual symbolism of the Book of Henry. It's very stupid. But
very Zack Snyder.
It really is. But goddammit, Janice is fuck, I need to go call Child Protective Services and get the stepdad arrested. So that's happening while the mother is talking to Glenn, and I'm not gonna shoot you, but you're a horrible person. I know who you are. I'm gonna get people involved here. This is gonna go bad for you. Because people have called Child Protective Services, but because he's a police chief, he's been able to sweep it under the rug because his brother works for CPS. Jesus Christ, Jackson, every time I think I can stop talking about a point, I have to tangent off to explain how we arrived in this scenario because this movie is so intricate in how terrible it is.
There's layers upon layers. I love, speaking of the chief's brother being the Child Protective Services head, I love how at the beginning when Henry calls Child Protective Services and, there's that shot where he comes and he talks, he's hey, don't worry about it. You can't hear what they're saying, but he can clearly see that things aren't getting investigated. I love that we cut to Henry opening up his stupid little file to see George Sickelman or whatever, his face in a big bold photo. He just had it the whole time. And I'm led to believe this nigh omnipotent genius just forgot this little detail that his brother runs CPS. It's not he didn't know. He had that information.
My favorite part about this whole thing is that this is implicitly within the film supposed to be they go grocery shopping, they get home, Henry sprints out of the car, runs upstairs, calls CPS, and then goes to help unload the groceries from the car. He's I'm gonna have enough time to do this before they realize what I'm doing if I run out of the car as fast as I can to go do this, and they're Henry, come help us unload. What? Why? You are home alone at certain times. That is clearly stated within the movie. Why would you not do it then? And why? It's inscrutable, much like everything else with this movie. We need to get to the end of this plot description.
All right, but before we do, though, that's Colin Trevorrow's dirty trick, is that whenever... This is related to the ending, actually, so no, finish up.
This is what I'm talking about. It's so hard. But this is why this movie's so good to talk about. I'm having a great time trying to describe this movie, but watching it is a fucking nightmare. So anyway, let's cut back here. Mom, Glenn, have this conversation. Mom fucks off to go meet her son at the talent contest. Glenn sees the cops pull up and shoots himself in the head. He commits suicide rather than face whatever was coming to him in some poetic justice moment that definitely could not have been called from 30 minutes earlier because it's very apparent what's about to happen. So that sucks. And then the mom gets to the back to the fucking talent show. Lee Pace showed up at the talent show because he's clearly hot for mom, and gave the younger brother a business card that has his cell phone number on it. That's not as relevant to the plot, but it's relevant to something that I want to talk about here in a minute.
Is it that Naomi Watts looks hot with a jacket and a gun?
No, it was not. But you know what? Fair point.
Get that woman to play Hawkeye in the Full Metal Alchemist movie.
Oh shit, that's actually really good casting. All right.
Anyway, Jackson's gun mommy fetish aside, here we go.
So she gets back to the talent show, and as she does, she sees the younger brother say that I have brought my brother back to be with us here tonight. And he opens a chest, kicks it, and out pours a ton of white dust, which, as Dan Olson points out, that this could very easily be interpreted as the ashes of Henry. It is confetti, but it is incredibly easy to be like, oh, what the fuck is that? Especially, could you imagine being in the audience when that happens? Everyone's like, oh, this is wonderful. My first thought would be, what the fuck is this?
Well, they're all dusted in Henry's divine, noble he lives in you dust, so it's fine.
And that's the Book of Henry. That was about a 15-minute plot summary. I just want to be clear. I want to be on the record that was about a 15-minute plot summary.
I mean, that first vlog Dan Olson did was just him literally describing what happened. And I don't think I've ever laughed harder than when he got to the part where he talks about his brother scattering his ashes into the crowd. It's just the way he says it. If you haven't watched the vlog, you really should. The delivery's really funny.
We'll put the links down below. Go watch Dan Olson's videos. They're great.
The dirty trick of the Book of Henry, and it's related both to this is the contradiction in the script, but I think mostly in the directing. Maybe a smarter director could have made this work somehow. That so there's all this religious overtone, Henry worship bullshit. My little brother's everyone's so delighted by being covered in his ashes and living on carrying out his proud Henry legacy. But then Mom doesn't shoot the police commissioner because, what? Henry's just a kid. Whoa! Doesn't matter if he's a really smart kid. He's just a kid. I can't trust his judgment.
I was about to kill a police commissioner because my 11-year-old deceased son told me to.
But the dirty trick is this, that because it has both of these elements, it's like Schrodinger's excuse. Colin Trevorrow is able to claim at any time that if Henry does something smart and good, it's because he's this Book of Henry, messianic figure. But whenever it doesn't make sense, whenever oh, I'm Henry, I'm gonna run upstairs and sprint out of the car and look suspicious and call and get the groceries again. Anything stupid like that is, oh, well, that's the flaw in his thinking because he's just a kid. That's the dirty trick at the core of this movie, and I hate it.
Mm-hmm. I think the other trick that doesn't work, that kind of works in some capacity, but what doesn't work in this movie is that it has so many plot points layered onto it that I think it's hoping that you lose track of it and just think the movie itself is smart for putting all of this together and having it coalesce into this one final scene that I didn't. I found it incredibly charmless and frustrating to try and watch and piece through.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of the J.J. Abrams approach. Just throw as much shit at the wall as possible and hope that you can make an entertaining enough moment and your actors are good enough that people won't notice. Because when you actually think about Henry's plan is that the direction shows us all this elaborate stuff, but his plan really amounts to make an appearance at the talent show so people think you're there and you have an alibi, shoot Glenn and throw him in the river. That's it. He even has her whistle through a walkie-talkie to attract him over like a fucking Assassin's Creed guard.
I can't believe that worked. Just as an aside, I can't believe that fucking worked.
Well, that's why the dirty trick makes me mad. It's because you can claim any dumb thing about Henry or his plan is intentional because he's a kid, but everyone in this movie is a brainless monkey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no one makes any fucking logical decisions. Just to circle back to Lee Pace, what fucking doctor hits on the mother of the deceased patient? What the fuck type of nonsense is this? This is awful. Why would she go for that? What is happening? Yeah, he's Lee Pace. Yeah, she's Naomi Watts with a gun. Great. That doesn't mean that this is okay, much like everything else in this movie.
He's just there, because she has to adopt the daughter at the end, so they live a happy family, even though, there's a lot of quasi-incest vibes, so she gets absorbed into the family, even though Naomi Watts was trying to hook her and Henry up, oh, she's cute, isn't she, Henry, my future daughter-in-law, and yet there she is, sleeping in Henry's bed, next to her, sharing a room with a little brother, which, that's not if they have enough money, I don't know why they only have that one room. I guess they wanted the set. It makes sense, I guess, for the little brother to idolize his big brother, but why is the girl sharing a bedroom with a little twerp?
Well, they explain that. They're working on the other bedroom. There's one throwaway line for it, yeah.
Oh, I must have, my eyes must have been rolled into the back of my head by that point.
No, that's really fair. It's an hour and 45 minutes long, and I checked out after about 3 minutes, and then kind of just occasionally checked back in. That's not true. I watched this movie pretty intently.
That one's on me. The Book of Henry has defeated me.
So I want to talk a quick second. I keep circling back to Lee Pace, and I want to talk about why. And it's not just because he is very attractive and was in Pushing Daisies, which is a great show that everyone should watch. No, it has nothing to do with that. In fact, it has more to do with how this movie was written and how it came out. Because, as Jackson alluded to, this movie started getting written in like 1998, and it's been floating around being edited, changed, updated ever since then. And that is abundantly clear in how the movie is structured. As I said, there's like 3 distinct vignettes throughout this movie, and each one feels like loosely related to the past, but not all the way. To crib more from an unrelated Dan Olsen video, when he was talking about 50 Shades of Grey and the nature of fan fiction as a weekly release thing, is how stories are structured is like A, B, C, and then the next week would be like C, D, E, as far as plot points go, and the week after that would be E, F, G. So there's still that overlap, but ultimately, like A and F are 2 completely unrelated things, which kind of feels like how Book of Henry goes. Like that first section is plot points A, B, and C. The second one is C, D, and E, and the last one is like A, E, and F in a weird way. And it's so fucking bizarre and how everything about this ties back into itself in its own weird way. And it's clearly that, like, this is a good scene, this is a good scene, this is a good scene. Let's extend that out in the script. Let's get this edited. It's clearly been edited and overworked for too many years. And so what we ended up with was this nightmare thing that doesn't make any sense. And I think my personal theory is that this was still being edited as the movie was being made.
Oh, like the script, you mean?
Yes. That the script was still being edited as the movie was being made. And here is my one scene of evidence that I'm going to use to back this up. And this is something that I actually paused the movie and Sam and I jokingly yelled at each other about for a little bit because she was mostly just mad that I rewound the scene like twice to make sure that I heard it correctly. But she's like, Sean, you have to fucking stop. I can't watch this movie anymore. I'm like, no, Sam, it's here. I promise. She's like, you're wrong. That's not what they said. I'm like, no, that is.
I hope that you expound upon your theory well, because they're going to drag you in front of the Hague for like war crimes for willingly exposing more of Book of Henry to Sam.
Yeah, I deserve it. Throw me in a prison, lock away the key. Especially because this is admittedly kind of a tenuous thing, but it's just enough that I do want to harp in on it. Okay, so Lee Pace, established doctor in the second act, 100% established. In the third act, after the little brother does the whole spirit of Henry upon the audience thing, he kneels down in front of the brother and is like, you know, I don't believe in magic because I'm a scientist, but in that moment, I believed. And I'm like, that's a weird thing, because this guy is clearly a doctor. And then it cuts back to the mom, where the little brother, clearly 80-yard in, says something like, thank you, Dr. whatever his name is. That feels like a course correction, like the shot was taken before the rest of it was established. And so he was a scientist when this was shot, and they had to, like, fucking fix that. Or, like, in the script, it still said he was a scientist from an earlier revision. They're like, shit, we can't let this get away. Let's just ADR something in here. So, like, that it's so small, it's so little, and it might literally just be a mistake, but it very much feels like a small microcosm of the bigger issue of this script just getting rewritten and reworked so many times that this one line slipped through, and oops, he's not a scientist anymore, because I could easily see him being a scientist trying to figure out what's wrong with Henry, how can we fix him, you know, I'm digging into, like, experimental treatments or something like that. Absolutely, in some version of this, Lee Pace could have easily been a scientist trying to save Henry, but he's not in this one. He's a doctor.
Yeah, it's also like, because when I this line obviously like stuck out to me too. I kind of brush it off as just like, you know, the movie's not very smart, and it was just like, oh, like doctors are science people, so he's a scientist, right? Or like he was trying to like talk down to the kid because he's a kid and thinks like a doctor decides the same thing. But like, no, I mean, I think that your explanation is completely plausible too, because I mean, it's just like Duke Nukem Forever. It's like it's been around for so long, you can like cut it like a tree and count the rings, you know?
Yeah,
like,
no, for sure.
You can see all the component parts and kind of identify like when and where they came from.
Ooh, that would be a really interesting thing, is to like actually dissect this. If you can get like your hands on an early version of the script and kind of like dissect where it relates to theater going audiences as it's happening, that could be really interesting. Because like that first act is definitely very 90s. The hospital act does feel kind of like 2000s era.
Like Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah. And then the lighter stuff feels a lot more like after Marvel started to pick up, because it's kind of like tongue-in-cheek dark in its own way. And like even the ending stuff feels more abrasive than the rest of it. Like when the mother comes on her own, like that feels almost kind of, I don't want to say like pseudo indie of the era, like not fully there yet, but like kind of a Cloverfield Lane type thing where it's like double A, so to speak.
Yeah, and I guess while we're talking about timeliness, that brings me to my nice Colin Trevorrow quote.
Yes, please tell me what Mr. Trevorrow has to say.
This was basically his defense of the movie, and it's a doozy of one.
All right, I'm ready to have my opinion of Book of Henry swayed.
The movie does go batshit crazy. Our world is batshit crazy, and our news cycle takes sharp turns every single day.
I hate this already.
That seem entirely surreal. And that film felt like the way I felt over the past 2 years, just enraged by these events that I am powerless to stop, and at times feeling like I'm losing my own compass as I try to deal with them. And so it was just the story that I wanted to tell in 2015 as we headed into that election. It's just what the world looked like to me. I made a film about holding predatory men in positions of power accountable for assault, and that is an uncomfortable subject to talk about. But we are talking about it now, and we're listening, and I hope the negative response won't don't deter other filmmakers from telling these stories because we need to hear them both in life and in art. So this is a very serious, very pressing movie about holding people accountable, Sean.
I mean, listen, Book of Henry says ACAB, and I'm okay with that.
It kind of does. No, I like the thing about this is that, like, if you look even just at the content of the script, that's not even necessarily like 100% wrong. It's just like you can tell Colin Trevorrow thinks he's hot shit. Like, ooh, I have to be the one to bring these like important issues in front of Hollywood. Like, it was just too dark for people to really get it. And like I hope that the failure of my movie doesn't mean that like all the poor people are like silenced. Very, very galling. I laughed very hard when I read that. It was such cope.
Yeah, it is very much like it hits things that are definitely present within the movie. Like, this movie does not want for thematic resonance in any way, shape, or form. It's a very thematic movie in a lot of ways, except for the fact that its themes are so incongruous with everything else it's trying to do. Like, that is the crux of Book of Henry, is that no two parts of this movie work in conjunction with itself. Its humor doesn't work with its story doesn't work with its themes doesn't work with its humor. It's this whole cyclical nature of just nothing clicking with anything else, and that's what really makes it so fascinating. That's why it's so good to talk about, because you can start to explore, like, yeah, his mother and Henry have a really uncomfortable, weird relationship, and that's almost something, but then it goes, nah, we can't focus on that because we have to focus on her trying to kill Glenn Sickleman because her 11-year-old messiah of a son told her to.
I can see why this would have been the kind of script that like maybe someone got weirdly like hung on. It's got that weird kind of premise. You're like, oh,
I would get weirdly hung on this script. This is a movie that, like, I'd be like, this is the most insane fucking thing I've ever read. Let's see what you can do with it.
Or like, ooh, like, it's so close, if I could just get it working, because, Jar Jar's a funnier character than we're used to. But, like, the thing about it is that, like, they just needed, if it's a bit, you must commit. And there were even times in this movie, as it is, where I'm thinking, like, when Henry, not when they're doing, like, the, your other left mom, like, that horrible, insufferable shit. But, like, at times where, like, the Henry recording is talking to her, and it's clearly, like, is like, the mom having, like, a psychotic, like, grief breakdown. Like, is Henry not actually talking to her? Like, the movie definitely gestures at that. And, like, you can make a, kind of a psychological thriller or even a dark comedy with that sort of premise, with that sort of ambiguity.
That
but
feels
it's just,
very
like,
Vertigo in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like, but, that's just another thing in the stew.
Right.
Thing that's, boiling in the pot with, like, it's like in fucking Persona 4 where the girls make curry and put in, like, they put in your carrots, your onions, your curry powder, but then you also have, like, chicken bones and like, chocolate sauce. Don't forget prime rib, like, thrown in there. Just literally, like, whatever they have in front of them, just throw it into the pot to make one, like, sickening stew.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, to Colin Trevorrow's detriment, where there was a bit, he did commit. And that bit was the hospital scene, and that goes on for 25 minutes too long. I wonder if that is the linchpin in why this movie just doesn't work so badly. Like, if that is the whole issue with this movie, is that it is such an abrupt turn in the middle to be this sad, desperate movie about a dying child, and then it suddenly flips back with legitimately, I can't stress this enough, a fucking record scratch moment. Yep, that's me. I bet you're wondering how I got to the point where my dead son is telling me to kill my neighbor. And then it continues on, but like there's just 30 minutes where the movie just slams on the brakes to be sad for no reason, especially because no one likes Henry, or at least the audience shouldn't.
I can almost see the logic of why we're dragging this out, that like, you're sitting there in screenwriter land and you're like, oh, I want the audience to really feel for the mom, but that's completely at odds with like the wacky bullshit you were doing at first. Like,
it's at odds with where it's going, too.
Yeah. Like, it's not a dark psychological thriller about grief. Like, there are 90s movies, 90s comedies with sad stuff in it, but usually it's like, in a movie like this, you'd expect, like, after the seizure, like, cut to them, like, standing at, like, Henry's gravestone, you know? Like, don't drag it out. Like,
or, like, give us, like, 5 minutes of it or something like that, but it goes on for so fucking long.
And like, I can only imagine that the logic was like, oh, we really want you to like feel for the characters, but the characters are also like one-dimensional cartoon stereotypes from the 90s. So it's a disaster. I'd say it's a glorious disaster, but like if you've gotten this far into this episode, you don't need to watch it.
No.
We're giving you all the goods.
The wildest part too is that the mother is clearly a very competent, good mother, but like she is shamed for taking 10 minutes to play video games in the middle of this and everything.
Also, Henry's the one who like harasses her about like working, even though she doesn't have to because he played the stock market. Like,
yeah, he is such a shit, and this movie tries so hard to make him not seem like that, but it is immediately clear that Henry fucking sucks so much.
That is the other thing that's so funny about Trevorrow's like, this is actually a very important Me Too movie, Cope, because he's so obviously like a huge raging misogynist. It's clear as day. Oh my god.
It's not even like the mother almost seems like she should be a negligent stoner in some capacity, but she is 100% not. She is a loving, caring mother who goes above and beyond for her children.
Yeah, single mom too, doing it all on her own.
Yeah,
I guess she's got her husband Henry.
Gotta cut up next to my son husband.
Sunsbin.
What if Chris Pratt was the father in this movie?
You know, I actually, when you mentioned earlier, like, Chris Pratt wasn't in this, he could have very easily been the doctor. He could have very easily done that.
Yeah, no, I very much see that because he's already worked with Trevorrow. They're looking for somebody who's conventionally attractive, but like wants a little bit more of a serious acting chops to it. Like I could see Chris Pratt being like, I need a bit of more serious acting under my belt if I'm going to continue acting. I want to do this, so let me be a doctor and tell a dying kid that he's dying. Yeah, it could have been Chris Pratt.
Guess this movie's got that going for it.
What up? That's 1 point, Book of Henry, and yet somehow fucking Jurassic World Around Kingdom is still winning.
Oh, what a sad state of affairs.
So just a quick update. Have we found a Colin Trevorrow movie we like yet?
No. After seeing the Jurassic World movies and this, I can't imagine Safety Not Guaranteed is like anything approaching a good time. I imagine it's a lot of the same smug, not as clever as it thinks it is, like ego trip bullshit that this is. Fuck Colin Trevorrow.
Yeah, I mean, even in this too, like, I don't know if did you pick up on, in the beginning, it almost had some, like, Paul Anderson vibes. Or Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson?
Yeah.
I always get Paul Thomas Anderson and Wes Anderson confused, and those are two very different directors.
I mean, but honestly, like, I feel like this movie kind of wants to be like a Paul Thomas Anderson thing. Is, you know, he's kind of closer to like a Coen Brothers. Like, he could probably do like a dark.
Wait,
comedy.
no, Paul Thomas Anderson. Fuck me. There's three
But
Andersons.
then there's Paul W.S. Anderson.
Paul W.S. Anderson is who I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
I'm thinking he's the guy who directs Resident Evil.
He's the guy who directs Resident Evil and Alien vs. Predator.
Yes, that's who I'm thinking of. Jesus fuck. But yes, the beginning of this felt very Wes Anderson to me.
Very
like mostly in
twee,
how
yeah.
it's like very almost Garden State in a lot of ways. I know it's not a Wes Anderson, but like at the same time it's brightly lit. It's very much of the indie of that era, and it's got a lot of like center framing stuff going on with it, and then that gets thrown out the window for this grosser, badly blocked framing where a lot of times it feels more like a music video. Like I wouldn't be surprised if like the DP worked in music videos before coming over to this.
Yeah.
And then it turns into this sad Grey's Anatomy thing for a little bit there where it's fine, but clearly
House was popular in the 2000s.
yeah, but clearly still doesn't understand like what the language it's getting across here because it's like supposed to be sad, tender moment, looks more like a fucking horny, weird moment between a fucking husband and wife rather than mother and son. And then
I will stand in the way of a bullet. I will run through a forest of flames.
and then it ends.
Thank God. At least it's got that going for it too. It's shorter than Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. Although, dude, like when I paused to like get a glass of water, and I thought like at least 40 minutes had passed, and it only been like 20. I'm like, I'm in trouble. Fuck me.
At one point, Sam is like, there has to only be like 10 minutes left in this movie, right? And I looked up with my phone and I'm like, haha, yeah, Sam, definitely. She's like, 20? I'm like, yep, definitely. 30? For 40? Yeah, there's 40 minutes left of this movie. And I watched her shatter into a million pieces and then be sprayed out over the audience.
Well, part of that, I guess one last genuine filmmaking thing before we go is I think part of that's structural because I noticed that like that first hour felt like interminably long, and that's just because like it's all so much setup, and then we get to like the assassination plot, and it just sort of goes. I think partially because the assassination plot is so simple that it's just shoot a guy and have him tumble into the river.
And it does help that like the juxtaposition of the talent show and the assassination plot does give it some momentum. It definitely thinks it's way more clever than it actually is because it's definitely not clever at all. But at least give it some momentum. I do have to give credit that I think the tap dancing scene juxtaposed with the mom moving towards shooting him, I think works really well actually. But outside of that, it continues to just juxtapose in ways that are like, haha, look at this, isn't this funny? And then no, it's bad, but at least gives it some momentum.
And that's why this movie is funnier to talk about than it is to watch because, like, Colin Trevorrow is not, like, an embarrassingly bad filmmaker as far as, like, he can construct a shot, he understands how to, like, you know, imply certain things with certain visuals. It's just none of it it's very rarely, like, good or clever, and most of the time it's just fine, which means that all you're really left with is the story, which is an embarrassing fever dream.
He can elevate bad to mediocre, but he can't elevate mediocre to good.
Oof.
Sorry, Colin. We good?
Oh, we're good, brother. We're good.
I've been Sean McKinda. Find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda.
I've been Jackson Keller. You can find me on Twitter at Jackson J. Keller, and you can find me on YouTube as Jackson Keller. I've been doing video essays now. I guess, like personal essay reviews. I don't know what the fuck you call them. I did a video about Super Mario World, and it's about childhood memory and the things that make us who we are and why that game is great. So you should go watch it. It's I think it's better than the Book of Henry.
I can confirm that it is a pretty good video. Y'all should definitely go watch it. You should also follow the podcast at BADH_cast on Twitter. We mostly tweet out updates when things are going on, like we had to take 2 weird breaks in the middle of September, or it's August? What the fuck month is it? It's September.
It's September.
It's September. It's almost October. So we had to take 2... Fuck me. Patreon.com/BADHcast. Go. We got a bonus episode coming up. We're a little bit behind, as I said. I think that y'all will forgive us. It's been a weird fucking month for a lot of reasons. Thank you to our $10 patrons.
Thank you so much. Julia, Travis, Pat, Mom, Summer, Rah, patrons here. You give us money all the year.
Also, thanks to those who are hyped for our theme song is Suicide. Also, take off the High Acting, Low Expectations, Rumble Band. You can check them out wherever you can. Buy the music, stream the music, Bandcamp, Spotify, all those good places. Do it. Also, thanks to 25yearslater.com. There's a button in the corner you can click on, but you should absolutely check out the website. There's a lot of really talented people doing a lot of really, really talented writing. Jackson, I just realized that like we spent 10 minutes talking about the Mario Brothers movie in the direct and everything like that before segueing into the Book of Henry, and that feels, as always, like form very much followed function.
Yes, true.
We are Henry level geniuses, and definitely didn't just want to shoot the shit about the Mario Brothers movie for a little bit. It was definitely
we
intentional.
commit to the bit so much harder than Colin Trevorrow could ever dream of.
Next week, we're going to be watching Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Join us, won't you? For we have the... Fuck off. Bye!
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go into the